Hi, everybody. So happy to be back again for this series. We're really trying to hit some cool topics across across the music publishing spectrum this week. So I, the founder and CEO of Equalizer Consulting. I do rights and metadata management services for both music companies as well as independent artists and musicians. And I'm also an educator, so I love talking about this stuff as much as anyone will let me. So I'm back. So as Carolyn said, yesterday we covered a lot of the basics to do with registrations, how to get some of your metadata right. Today we're going to talk about sync because it is a hot topic. It is something that a lot of people are really interested in and want to hear more about. And it's can be a bit of a sort of, well, I want to do that, but how do I even break into that? But before you break into that, what do you need to do to prepare for those opportunities so that when the opportunity might come your way, you are ready to accept it? So we've got an amazing panel today. I'm going to call on the panelists in no particular order. If you can introduce yourself and, you know, who you are and how you work within the sync space. So I'm going to start with Devin. Devin, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Devin Kagadok. I work at the Greater Goods Co. We are a independent sync licensing agency, so we work with all levels of music creatives, from independent artists and producers to independent, labels and publishers, all of that. So, yeah, we represent their rights for sync licensing opportunities, and we do administration as well, like on the sync licensing front. So, yeah, that's where we fit in on the business.
Awesome, great. Deja, I'm going to turn over to you.
Hi, my name is Deja Siegler. I am CEO and music supervisor of Illuma Inc. I have a full service music supervision company. In addition, I like to offer music business consulting on the side. Very similar to Natalie, I think it's important to always educate artists and to make sure that they always are aware of different opportunities. So I think it all goes hand in hand.
Amazing. And last but not least, Jeremy.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jeremy. I've been doing this for quite a while, about a 20 plus year career in all things licensing. I've been on the label side, I've been on the publishing side, I've even been on the client side as a music supervisor. Basically sat on all sides of the table, so very well versed in the sync process from the creative side and the actual licensing side. Major labels, major publishers, independent artists who control all of their rights. I've worked with them all and hope to share some of that insight with you today.
Amazing. Okay, so for those who may not be super familiar, what I'd actually like to start with is kind of going back to the basics. So when we look beyond streamings and merchandise and stuff like that, and we're looking at, other revenue opportunities, so that can include sync, gaming, fitness, brand partnerships, and so on. So in this sort of broader licensing category, what are some of the different opportunities that artists and independent musicians, artist managers and so on should be aware of? I'll open that to any of you that want to speak up.
I see a couple different categories that kind of emerge here. I think all of them can be sync licenses, and even in these individual categories, fitness is kind of an interesting one. I think the Peloton type of music experience in that fitness category, that's more of a blanket digital license. That's a little bit of a different scenario, typically based on my experience with those types of platforms. But I think, gaming is basically just a sync license. The budgets are a little bit different. The terms and length of term can be a little bit different, but effectively, it's a license for the recording side. It's a license for the publishing side. It's typically a buyout fee. In the rare instance that it's a music-based game, there may be an applicable royalty, but more often than not, when you think of your in the gaming space anyway, when you think about Madden or FIFA, the game formerly known as FIFA, which is now EAFC, or NBA 2K, or any of those larger soundtrack type of titles. Those are going to be, individual buyouts. And then And then, you've got your other more traditional syncs, I guess. Most people think of film and TV, I think, and when they think about sync, those all have their own term lengths and budgets that are sort of unique to themselves as well. And then advertising is kind of its own beast. Those are usually shorter term lengths, often better budgets, but they're, very branded, obviously, by nature, exercises. And those can be a lot different than some of your film and TV type of uses and how the music's used and how it might be manipulated in the spot as well. But those are sort of the general categories how I tend to look at licensing opportunities.
Got it. So sync in its definition, right, is really the taking a visual component and attaching the music to that, the sync of the
Audio to
music to
picture,
the visual.
synchronizing each
Correct.
other. Yep, exactly.
Right. So
And
those, just to take that back to basics a little bit. And so obviously, as Jeremy has just mentioned, there's a lot of different ways that that can be applied. Deja, did you want to add something?
I think Jeremy did a great job.
I saw you came off mute. So.
As I knew he would. I knew he was going to be Michael Jordan of this. But yeah, nothing really to piggyback on unless we're specifically talking about the licensing process in film and TV.
Got it. So with that in mind, what are some things that artists should be aware of that could make their songs potentially attractive for a sync opportunity? Are there, specific genres or specific qualities that are more in demand or, as a music supervisor that would sort of catch attention?
For sure. I think, any artist who is looking to get in the space, should always be mindful that research is important. If there is a TV show that you like, look up who the music supervisor is, see what other projects that they're working on. Even if you're watching a show and you're like, I feel like my music would be a great fit, understanding how to make music in that vein. I think sometimes artists can be very like one track minded and like, oh, well, I really want to hit. And not all music that's made for sync is necessarily made for radio or just for leisure. So just being mindful and like very intentional in what you're making. And so that can be an array of genres. If something is your bread and butter, what you're really good at, then stick to that. But be open. I always say like research who that music supervisor is, look at their works, create a playlist that's very specific, title that playlist. Something that we were talking about prior to is how we all love disco. So making sure that like your disco playlist says who the music supervisor is, what the show is, the genre, and don't send music that has nothing to do with the show. Like normally, typically, a music supervisor has very little time on their hands. And if they do have an opportunity to listen to music that was pitched to them, it needs to make sense for their time. So make sure that that's clearly defined. And even in your email, say, this is what I'm sending, list that you've got the splits confirmed, the artist, if there were any samples that were used, be very clear that you've made sure that those samples were cleared. Just give as much information as possible and just make sure that everything is clearly defined. And let's say you want to pitch for more than one show that they're working on, send a different email. Just make sure that you're as thoughtful as thoughtful as much as you can be in the process.
Amazing. Devin, in the sort of the greater goods platform, what are the kinds of things that you find most helpful when people are submitting into your space?
Yeah, for like a more general approach to it, if you're not, looking to get a specific, supervisor's ear or trying to get into a specific show, but more just looking for general like representation for sync. And this kind of goes, across an artist catalog period. If you're looking for, a publishing deal or anything like that, you're kind of looking to sell yourself why you kind of fit the agenda. And same thing with the supervisor. You want to do your research on like, for example, for us, like the agency that you're approaching. You want to look at the kind of clientele that they have on both sides, when it comes to representation, who they represent, and then also the kinds of opportunities that they're landing and placing and securing. Are those in line with what you're, trying to do? If a agency looks like they're doing a lot of licensing for, like commercial advertising and stuff like that, but you don't necessarily want to align your music with brands all the time. Like, maybe that's not the agency for you. Maybe you're looking for one that's more in line with, TV opportunities in film and also the level of those opportunities too. if you really feel like you're on a Kendrick Lamar level, you want to find people who are getting those Kendrick Lamar level placements. But yeah, I think in general, just having your music universal, but also not necessarily always made for sync is kind of a good thing. I think audiences and supervisors are all music fans, and a lot of them can tell the difference between something that's trying to be an imitation of something and something that sounds authentic but still kind of hits all the marks. So, being dynamic, having clear lyrics, emotions, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, just kind of selling yourself on why your music's kind of compelling in that sense. And yeah, just like I said, doing your research, and like DJ said, doing your research on what you're trying to achieve. It's a craft at the end of the day. Like this is more of like the craft part of the deal than kind of like the art of it. And that's not to say to not be yourself when creating this music. That's what, kind of what I was alluding to before. We want this authenticity to shine through, but it has to shine through in a very specific way when it comes to, what's going to be in a show, a film, or a commercial.
Absolutely. So I'm going to pull on a couple of things that you both touched on there, which is really, there are slightly different things that a music supervisor might be looking for than when you're releasing your music commercially, right? And there's also different elements that could be interesting. And, if you talk about advertising, for example, which Jeremy, you mentioned, and you also talk about something like lyrics, right? Advertising and lyrics actually go very well together because it is something that a music supervisor might be looking for. They might be looking for like a certain catchphrase or something like that. So, can any of you speak to sort of the differences in what a music supervisor might be looking for and how they search that might be different from just a standard consumer who's, putting together a Spotify playlist?
I can kind of jump off on the advertising since you cracked that door anyway. There's some evergreen themes that I think apply in advertising in particular. I think they also apply in film and TV. But if you think about advertising, a brand is trying to deliver a message in a film and TV environment. You may have an entire scene. You may have even up to a full use of a track to sort of match that whatever emotion they're trying to evoke in the film with whatever emotion they're trying to pull out of that music and find that meeting point. With a brand, you've got to do that usually in 30 seconds or less, maybe 60 if you're lucky. And in this day media environment, we're probably talking more like 15 seconds or 6 seconds on social media platforms. So we got to get in there quickly and get very, very direct. And that's kind of hits on some of those lyrical themes that you're talking about. Um, some of the evergreen ones that pop up in advertising would be, themes of togetherness, themes of unity, home, family, those types of opportunities. Those speak, you can probably already envision your car insurance ads and things of that nature that might lean into those types of themes. You've also got your Nike and your Gatorade spots where we're looking for, pump up jams, inspiration. We're probably looking for a lot more dynamic production on that sort of front. And I think as I'm saying all these words, like if I'm on Spotify, I'm usually not looking with that type of intentionality to borrow a really key word that Deja dropped. I think that's very, very important. The intentionality of it. Like brands are very intentional when they're using music, and you've got to make sure that you're aligning with what the intent of that spot might be. Lyrics are a great way to do that. The production styles can also can do that to a certain extent as well. Your warm organic production is going to work for certain brands where your more aggressive industrial or trap hip hop might speak to a completely different sort of branded client base. Both very viable lanes forward, but very, very different approaches. And so I think just you're kind of getting back to the disco idea here. You're looking at what kind of tags can you apply to your music that will make your music a little bit easier to be discovered by these supervisors or these brands or whoever the sync client might be. And so instead of just looking at the what playlist you might be on Spotify, dig a little bit deeper into that evaluation of your music and what are the lyrical themes? What kind of emotion does the production evoke? Are they male vocals? Are they female vocals? Getting that granular, I think, as you tag your tracks and help make them discoverable with your metadata, that's a really key way to analyze your music much differently than your average consumer would, where they might just be making a hip hop playlist or a workout playlist. It's very surface level. We got to get a little bit deeper on that evaluation.
Amazing. I'm gonna drop my article on tags in the chat because it was actually I love creative and descriptive tags is a very important way, which dovetails straight into like maintaining metadata. For those who know me, it's my favorite topic, right? But why is having your rights, your metadata, your co-writer details, you've kind of touched on this already. Devin or Deja, do you want to speak in like a little bit more detail about why those are so essential in the sync space?
Well, yeah, it makes the song easier to clear. I think that we all want, the process to flow. And as a music supervisor, there's only so much time that we have per song. I mean, who knows, you might be working on multiple projects at one time. So just to make it easy on all of us, as well as it's just a good practice, right, for any space that you're working on to be organized. So to make sure that the process will be easy from start to finish, making sure that you have any contacts available to be able to send over for those writers. Like, let's say it's not one stop and you're not clearing everything on your own, making sure that you have that available, making sure that those writers know ahead of time, making sure that you have your music registered in BMI, ASCAP, whatever your PRO is, or just that it's readily accessible anytime that, I need to Google it, look it up, even if it's on Spotify. Also, if you know that communication style for you, you're more likely to answer on social media, checking your messages. I can't tell you how many times I have reached out to an artist via Instagram, just to say, hey, I really want to use your song. And they responded and were able to loop me in with their team. Making sure that your management team, whoever that might be, also has your information on hand. Greater Goods is amazing. I don't even know if Devin knows, but I'm working on a project right now, and they have been very helpful in making sure that we're able to clear these flagey tracks. And although I have a relationship with the label, they are handling some of the harder work so that I can focus on more of the creative in the show. So whoever it is that's on your team, making sure that all of the information is available across all parties. And also if you do have like a library and you are sending that over as well, because let's say I like one song and I'm like, you know what? The process was easy. They were able to work with my budget. I want to see if they have something else that could work for the project. If I go to your library, if I go to wherever that database is that you have your music and I'm able to search, if everything is tagged, that makes it easier for me as well to maybe give another opportunity and or keep it on hand for later use. I always want to work with people who want to work with me. And that means like when they make things easy and simple, I know that it's never going to be an issue. And the same thing could be in the same vein of, let's say we're working on an original song, and the turnaround time is quick. Knowing that you were able to work with me in a fashion that was very organized prior to and just a simple licensing process would also motivate me more to want to work with you in the future on that as well.
Fantastic. Devin, you have anything to add on onto that just with your work?
Man, they definitely covered a lot. But yeah, I would just hammer home some of those points that being everything being readily available. You know what I mean? I think a lot of artists, when they say that they want to take sync seriously, it's that they think that just creating the music is taking it seriously, and really it's the other half of it where okay, now they're going out, getting publishing splits early on, getting contacts ready for things to be clearable because that's really the name of the game. Is it clearable? A lot of times supervisors will they'll turn something down because they can find something that's clearable. Even if it doesn't fit the creative as well, it's their bottom line is to get something, through that finish line, right? And so, whether that's their prize pick or whether that's what's clearable is always kind of that's really the game. So yeah, just kind of having things readily available. I was gonna bring this up later as kind of like a insider kind of tip, but one thing that I think a lot of especially like producers, just people who tend to frequently collaborate with others can kind of look to do is maintain the right to one stop represent your music. So representing it one stop, meaning you can clear it one stop just with you. You don't have to reach out to any other parties while keeping those parties as royalty participants. You can have them, you can still pay them out. They can still have splits on your song, but maybe you're just the only one clearing the song, and they just give you all that all of their rights on that front. So I think that's like a really cool tip. Just yeah, just being available for the opportunity. I don't remember how the quote exactly goes, but it's like fortune favors the prepared or luck favors the prepared or something like that. Like, yeah, I think that really rings true when it comes to sync. Just be prepared, have everything ready for when a supervisor asks for it. Even assets too, like physical assets. Do you have splits to your songs? Do you have instrumentals ready, acapellas if they need it? Sometimes for editing needs, these things are assets, these things are tools, for the creative project that they're fleshing out. So kind of treat your own, assets as such and realize that being ready for the opportunity it goes a long way when it comes to sync because a lot of this is based on really tight timelines.
It is. I actually said luck favors the prepared yesterday, so that can be the
Yeah.
theme for the week. Because it is so important to have all of your metadata, your rights, and so on in place before the opportunity is there, right? Just the same way as you want it ready before you have your viral moment, you want it ready before a music supervisor knocks on your door and says, "Hey, we'd love to use this," especially because sometimes they are trying to turn things around in like an hour or 2 hours, like really, really quickly. And I'm just gonna also, from a back to basics standpoint as well, just remind everybody that there are two clearances that are required for a sync use, right? Unless they are not using a sound recording, and Glee is the one that comes to mind, right? Where the characters are singing the songs live, like they have to get that musical work, which is your underlying composition cleared. But if they're using the sound recording, they have to do both, right? They have to clear with both the writers and as well as the sound recording owner. So, a big part of that is having everything in place so that it can be turned around quickly. So on the backside of that, what are some really distinct deal killers?
No, no
Things to,
splits, whether
no,
publishing or assets. That is huge. I mean that's the like splits. Make sure your publishing splits are sorted. Make sure the writers know what they control. Make sure every party involved knows exactly what they control. To Devin's point, if you could have one person be the primary liaison for that licensing, it's going to open up so much more opportunity. If you have to go chase down the hip hop producer on Instagram, and I've had to do it for my own artist on a major label before. I've had to go find these people on Instagram. It's they can very well be deal killers. And then the asset side of it, making sure these folks need to edit your song into their own creative work. And so they're going to need as many tools as possible to do that. So the instrumental, the acapella, the clean version, all of those, the moment the final masters are done, you should have everything bounced out into nice, clean, identifiable folders. That should marry up against all your metadata stuff. That alone opens up so many opportunities for you, and then add some lyrics on top of that, so you can actually be searchable in Disco. Man, you're off to the races. That's a great jump off point.
amazing.
There are times when I must say, when more artists are willing to work with me on budget than not, like I always go back because then I know that I have an opportunity to give to you when I wasn't able to give before.
And sync activity tends to beget sync activity. And so if you can get a little bit of momentum rolling, more opportunity, whether it's from the same supervisor or other friends of that supervisor being like, "Oh, where did you find that cut?" Usually this is a ball that gets rolling downhill. And so my default advice to almost any independent artist who's looking for their very first jump off in sync is just say yes. Yes, you always negotiate and always ask questions and get yourself the best deal, but you should probably be saying yes, and then trying to build that momentum from there.
That's great advice. You got to start somewhere, right? You got to build your portfolio somewhere. So, um, you mentioned in perpetuity data. There's some terminology that I think, can be a little bit tricky in a sync deal or any kind of licensing deal that you might come across. So, what are some key terms that you might suggest we, let this group know to be paying attention for, because I have a friend who recently had a non-exclusive license for her track with a library.
Mm.
And once we actually dug into the detail, it wasn't anywhere near as non-exclusive as she thought. So I ended up breaking down a lot of little things for her. So what are some terms that you might suggest keeping an eye out for?
Okay. Well, let's tackle the library side first. So I think when, it comes to that exclusivity piece, I think it's important to talk to the library and to ask if you can use that outside of the library under a different song title. So I used to work for a music library, and that's something that we allowed artists to do so that there was no conflict of interest, so that they were still able to license that track if they, let's say they had the relationship with the music supervisor and we didn't place it on a show and they did, they were still able to use it as well as use that new title on streaming platforms. So they were always able to be able to collect. So that's definitely something that I would say to have a conversation with if you're able to moving forward. On the licensing end, it's pretty standard. It's going to be rights, term, territory, fee. That's always going to be what you see. So for those rights, more often than not, you'll see all media excluding theatrical. Anything that is theatrical will always be discussed in those rights. And normally you're looking at a completely different fee, as well as how many screens it'll be playing on. Will it only be in the US? There's a little bit more nitty gritty when it comes to that. But normally it'll say AMXT, excluding theatrical. And then you'll also see more oftentimes than not because of like streaming services now, you'll see all TV online and wireless. So that's something to be mindful of because it'll only exist in that space. So like when I license for Viacom CBS, that's the way that we clear it. Or we'll do all media if it's going to air on broadcast television. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is just where is the actual film or TV going to play? There's a few other, I think I did send something over, but I'm not going to share my screen because my computer looks crazy. Um, but there's like DVD, which we really don't work with as much these days. There's those that are just digital video downloads, which I would say Jeremy could probably speak to a little bit more for actual gaming, and then non-broadcast, non-theatrical. But really, you're only going to see more of those AMXT, excluding theatrical, all media, or all TV online wireless. For your term, you're normally going to see in perpetuity. I love to clear in perpetuity, make my job easier. If you're not clearing in perpetuity, you will normally see one of two things. You will see, okay, this is what that term is. It could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years. And that's also just based on the licensing deal that's done with the production company and the studio, the network, period. However, you could also see an option clause. And within that option clause, it'll say, we would like to relicense this for, I don't know, 5% increase, or it could give you a new licensing fee in this time, once the deal has expired. So normally in the actual license agreement that you will sign after, okay, let's back up if I can take 2 seconds.
Go ahead.
So initially in the process, one will receive a quote request. And in that quote request, it'll have the synopsis for the show. It will tell you what the actual use details are. So it'll either have like what the film is, the television, the project, the episode, what we want to use for, whether it's a background vocal, whether it's a background instrumental. Sometimes, if you're just really good at making, to Jeremy's point earlier about production, and you have very strong instrumentals on your end, sometimes that will be the only thing that we will use, or visual vocal. So as Natalie mentioned earlier, let's say that we're only licensing your publishing because we're using your lyrics and we're going to record our own sound recording or our own master for the television show. Then that will also be clearly listed, visual, instrumental, and that's normally the things that you will see. Sometimes you'll see people miming those things and they're playing your master track. From there, it'll have the scene description, and then you'll have the master use detail, which will have the song ownership. So that's where you would clearly define if you're the only owner of the song, if there is somebody else who is also an owner of the song, if there are any sample use, any notes that we have on our end. Let's say that we want to chop the song. Let's say that we want to completely change it. Let's say that we want to add something else on top of it. The composer is going to make the song different, right? Those are all things that we would lay out then. And then you'll have that publishing detail, which will have the writer, publishing information, those confirmed splits, your PRO information. And then you will see what I'm listing as your rights term, territory, and fee. So being mindful of that. And then when it comes to territory, it's typically always going to be worldwide. And for your fee, it's going to be per side. So as Natalie mentioned earlier, you have your master side and your sync side. You will always see it listed per side. So if it's 2K per side, that's $4,000 all in. It's always going to match no matter what. It's always going to be the same. And then it's going to be paid out based upon that percentage. I have worked with a lot of different people in the past who did not have proper, well, as you guys are in this panel series right now, not having proper writer and publishing platforms set up to be able to receive said money, and I think it's always important to remember when you do not have these things in place, you are losing money. So always make sure that you have everything in line, everything organized, everything registered so that you're always receiving. MFN was something that we talked about prior to most favored nations. Let's talk about MFN though. So something that's really important to remember going in as an independent artist is budget again. So let's say I license a big song from who would actually clear? Actually, I licensed a big track from Kendrick most recently. I actually got it for a very good price. But let's just say that I was able to license a track for $10,000. I might only have $5,000 left in my music budget. A lot of times people like to do MFN per the series, right? So they want whatever rate somebody else got in the series, they want as well. I think it's important to license MFN per song. So going into it, be mindful, okay, they may not have it in the budget to be able to give me $10,000 for this track. I'm willing to either waive my MFN, I as the independent artist, to say I'm okay to move forward with just this amount, or I'm willing to do MFN per song, or ask if how many songs are also in the episode to say, okay, well, am I getting the highest fee for this episode? And then you could also clear MFN per episode. There's ways around it to make sure that you're always ensuring the best fee. But MFN can be played with, and it is something that's important to also be flexible with as you move forward in your career.
So I'm just going to say that MFN is most favored nations, right? And that basically is a negotiation tool that indicates that you will also get the most favorable terms, options, rate. They're like Deja's saying, there's lots of different ways they can swing it as other people and other rights owners who are also being licensed in that. I will say, because I guess I'm kind of old and I used to clear sync for DVDs, so they're behind me. But anyway, I'm old. I used to clear for the physical media. I used to do a lot of, DVD clearances for concert videos. And one person who is refusing to back down on MFN could blow the budget for the entire thing, right? Because there might be a concert where, let's say, Lennon McCartney or something like that was put in there. You've got Beyonce, you've got, whoever, Taylor Swift, right? And they are demanding a higher rate. And then you might have something that is a smaller person who is trying to also demand that same rate. And to Deja's point, it's just not possible. And so the option back in those concert videos would be to edit it out, because it's probably cheaper to edit it out than blow the entire budget. Or the flip side of that would be to not use it and potentially move on to a different clearance option. And Jeremy, when we actually talked way back originally, you had mentioned, I think, a trailer that you did, right? That like the
That was
clearances.
yeah. So Fortnite's gotten a little wacky with their trailers where they've got multiple songs involved. If you saw the recent remix one that they did with Snoop and Dre and Eminem and I think it was Ice Spice and what else was there? Oh, Juice World. Thankfully those were all one label group, so it made it a little bit easier. But even within then, there were basically tiers that applied artist by artist, and like Grand Theft Auto, their in-game licenses, they often have an RIAA certification tiering. And so if you've gone platinum, you can be within this tier of fees. If you've gone gold, you can be in this tier of fees. And they often will allow MFN within those tiered out fee structures. Electronic Arts, they make EAFC and Madden, and they'll do tiered structures, a little bit more informal though. And those in the gaming instances, your MFN stipulations are typically just master recording against publishing. It's a lot harder to make those plays against the entire soundtrack, just because there's so much volume. There's 20, 40, 100 songs in some of these games, and expecting parity on par with such a wide scope of soundtracks is not terribly realistic. Um, Going back to some of the I guess the usage and the term lengths, I think advertising is a lot different. Most of the stuff that Deja laid out applies very cleanly also to kind of gaming. There's pretty standardized terms there. They usually want life of product or perpetuity, and the uses are pretty standard. When you get into the advertising space, it can be crazy, crazy wild and crazy segmented. We do regional ads that may only air in the Northeast for whatever regional bank that might be there. And so those fees will look a lot different than the US wide or North American wide or worldwide campaigns from similar brands. And the fee structures will vary quite wildly as well. TV. If you want streaming TV, that's called connected TV or over the top rights. Those are not automatically included in your standard broadcast rights. Advertising licensing gets very, very granular and delineated, because every deal is a little bit different. The media buys are very, very different. And so that one's just a little bit more nuanced. And that's where, it's wise to ask a lot of questions when you're uncertain about things. And it's also why it's very, very helpful just to have a trusted partner to help you navigate these waters. Some of this stuff is just, it, you need to be doing it for 10, 15 years so you can see all of the crazy deals that have happened and know what things to sort of guard against, what pitfalls might be out there, and what sort of landmines you might want to try to avoid. But trusted partners are very important, I think, in the sync space, for not only the access but also guidance in these negotiations.
I would agree with that just in general, especially with publishing and the music industry in general, pick your partners wisely. And you'll see things in agreements that say any media here in known or thereafter invented, and you've licensed it for basically anything that they might come up with in the future. So I'm going to throw this over to Devin real quick because I do want to get to some questions that are in the chat. Are there specific platforms or resources that you recommend? I know we've said Disco a couple of times. If you want to explain what Disco is, for those who may not know, and anything else you may recommend.
Yeah, disco is a godsend. I don't know what people were on before disco because that thing is magical. It's like it's like a streaming and library platform that a lot of publishers, music supervisors, labels, sync houses, everybody uses it to kind of house music, categorize music, and send music to each other for a lot of these things. So like music supervisors, DJ, I don't know if you have one directly, but they'll have like a disco inbox that you can upload to. They have like inboxes that you can send to. You can easily upload to your own library and everything like that. And then it has like readily available metadata, kind of areas to fill out. So yeah, if you don't have your music on Disco and you really want to get into sync, I would definitely recommend looking into Disco. Just to kind of organize your music, make it easily shareable. And nobody wants to download music anymore, so please don't send like downloadable links. Like, please send any kind of streaming that you can. Disco is a great way to do that so that people can readily stream your music without having to download it and take up storage and all that. And yeah, Disco is great just because, like I said, metadata is like easily accessible and you can manipulate it, directly. So we love Disco. Definitely get on Disco. Um, I think one platform that's really cool is TuneFind. It's where you can look up. It's here. I'll put it here in the chat. but it's just a site where you can look up and research your favorite show's soundtracks and literally see usually cue by cue, song by song, what they're using. So I think that's one that a lot of people can take advantage of just to do research on the kinds of shows and soundtracks and everything that you are looking to get into. And other platforms or resources. I think that's pretty much it. Disco covers a lot. If you're using like Box, that's still great too, just to deliver assets and lyrics and everything like that. Um, yeah, not many other resources for me to add.
Okay, Jeremy or Deja, briefly, do you have anything else you want to add?
I dropped it in the chat, but I can't bang on about Disco more. I just they've embedded themselves with the creative community, and you're best served to use tools that the creative community is already using. It makes you can literally they can drop your stuff into their own folders. Your metadata transfers over already. You are now searchable in their own folders. When most creatives, I think, look at what they have already before they go out and do sort of a pitch call. And so that's the easiest access, and it's a great organizational tool to boot. So I can't co-sign that one enough. But I think there's some other interesting platforms out there that sort of hybridize some of that stuff. If you're going to set up your own licensing process as well, like Chordal, very very interesting product right now. I really like what they're doing, and there's also third-party platforms that are almost like libraries, but they're also storefronts. So you think of your music beds, your sound stripes. A lot of those places will work with third party content and do the licensing on your behalf. But they're also a platform that supervisors use from time to time as well. So Deja could probably speak to how useful those other platforms are better than I can. But there's a variety of tools out there. I would ask your other fellow artists, fellow musicians, who they're working with, who they trust. Some places have areas of strength that are better than others. Some sync shops specialize in a certain vibe rather than others as well. And so, find the tools that suit you best. But as far as the one tool, I think with the most blanket broad appeal that can do the most for you would absolutely.
Yeah, I co-sign all of that. Well
Cool.
said. Perfect. And the only thing I would say when sending music, a non-expiring link, which is why we love Disco. And Dropbox, because I saw Devin also said that.
Yes, Dropbox is the standard. And I'll say, having worked on proprietary sync systems and trying to build those within my corporate existence, we still had to be integrated with Disco because ultimately that's where the music supervisors go. And if you're wanting to reach the music supervisors, you have to get into Disco. And so even a proprietary system probably still links in. So
And you can
something.
probably have your distribution feed from supply chain right into Disco to get all of your music there in one fell swoop as well. And then you can get busy with the metadata tagging from.
Very
And what's
important.
amazing about Disco too, sorry if I could just add
No,
something
go
real
ahead.
quick, is it's also like they kind of have a lot of tools for you to use to market as well. Like we use the email creator and mail blast system very often. And then a lot of you can set up kind of like a page, that kind of like highlights everything that you want to highlight on the platform and on the site itself. So it's you have like your own kind of like individual site on Disco. So it's not just a platform for sending and receiving music. You can
It's
set up these
storefront.
pages so that
Yeah.
exactly it's an entire ecosystem in itself. So it's a really great platform. You can get a lot done with it, and you can really use it to support just kind of every area of your career.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to shift over to questions because I want to make sure we do dedicate some time to this. I'm actually going to address the question about split sheets. A split sheet doesn't have to be anything super fancy, but it does need to be something that everybody agrees upon, and you get that figured out as quickly as possible once you've created that song, because the longer you leave it, the more likelihood it is that chaos will happen. For those of you who were on yesterday, as Jamie said, the MLC has a free one that you can go onto their website and get. There's various ones out there, but ultimately, as long as everybody that was involved in the creation is going to sit down and write down, it's going to be better if you bring it with you rather than trying to scramble after the fact and put one together. So, turning over to the panelists here, do you have any recommendations on where to start looking for sync supervisors or organizations? And feel free to plug yourselves because you are here. It seems like a great resource there.
One place that I think is great is the Guild of Music Supervisors. So there is a website. You can be a member and not be a music supervisor. And you're able to go to the conferences, you are able to go to the award show. And when you do go to these places, you're able to put yourself in front of different music supervisors, different creatives. Like I'm sure Devin would be there, Jeremy would be there. Like there's so many different people that you're able to connect with. In addition, you're also able to like apply for like a mentee mentor program, which I personally think is great because you're able to learn a little bit more about the actual licensing process and it's a little bit more hands-on. And it puts you in close interaction with the music supervisor. So my mentee, she now works for BMG PM, which is like their production music side. And it creates different career opportunities while also continuing to still be an artist. You're still able to work in your space, but you're also kind of able to build out a different path, I guess you could say, and one that supports your artistry.
Amazing.
Um, yeah, there's a lot of like different groups that I would say to go to. There's a lot of like there's sync collectives. There's Women in Sync. You have the Women in Music LA chapter, which I think is also great because in there it has different like music industry professionals, and some of those are specific to sync. There's a lot actually.
And I think checking your panel at your conferences, there's always going to be a sync panel, and look at who makes the rounds there. Those are usually folks that know what they're doing because they've been invited to speak on a panel and share their knowledge with other folks. But I think that's also just a good idea of who's actively out there, marketing themselves and their company and is proactively seeking new business and new clients that way. I think that's a great way to find folks, whether that be South by Southwest or the actual Sync Summit, or certainly a friend of the guild is the absolutely the best way. But I think some of those opportunities, LinkedIn, I think was mentioned here as well in the chat. That's a great place to just sort of get kind of a wide view of who's got the lights on, who's open for business, which company you choose to partner with, and how you evaluate those. That's very much going to be an artist by artist consideration. I think Devin mentioned this earlier, but making sure you align with a company that's going to fit your music and has had success with the type of music. Are the vibes right, or are you going to be the odd one out based on the rest of their roster? And the terms of the deal, I think, matter quite a bit here as well. I think there's a pretty wide range of sync service rates that exist out there. Some folks can take more aggressive approaches to, wanting exclusivity and wanting ownership in certain instances. And I think you got to be very mindful and aware of that going in. Make sure you're asking a lot of questions, getting into the nuances of those agreements, as Natalie mentioned with the library arrangement. Maybe you're backing yourself into an exclusive arrangement without realizing it. So making sure you're really, finding the right fit at first, but then doing your homework and doing your diligence on those deal terms and making sure that can work for you as well.
Okay, so you guys actually are brilliant because you're kind of answering a bunch of questions at the same time because I was looking in the chat here and it's sort of, there's a lot of other questions about sort of networking and the best ways to sort of get in front of people, not just, sending cold outreach, in the hopes of avoiding burnout on that one. And just, I think that in general in music, fostering relationships is such an important piece of advice just because it's actually a very small industry, even though it seems like a big industry. I swear we're all 1 degree separated from each other in some form. Because even as, those of us who are here, I guarantee if I go on LinkedIn, we'll all have some kind of like, combined connection somewhere. It is a small industry. And so, again, kind of what Deja was saying earlier, you learn very quickly who's good to work with, who's difficult to work with, who's very flexible, who's being a real stickler. I kind of thought this was an interesting question. Have you ever seen MFNs disrupt professional relationships?
I don't know if MFN itself was the problem. Um,
Hmm.
Usually MFN, I think, is a fairly at least in the media lanes that I typically swim in, it's fairly understood when it applies and when it doesn't. If you're an independent artist who covered an iconic catalog song, you're probably going to break your MFN in that instance because the copyright, uh, the Beatles song that you covered is kind of standing on its own. Regardless, your cover might be amazing, by the way, and I'm sure it is, but it doesn't mean you get the same money the Beatles get. And I think that's kind of it's typically an understood sort of approach there. But certainly there have been instances where it's MFN across multiple songs where I think it was Deja who mentioned it. Like, oh no, it was you, Natalie. Like, it just takes one to tank a whole thing. And that absolutely has happened to deals that I've worked on. Absolutely. Nothing I can necessarily share which artist, which project, but I've absolutely seen things die because of entrenchment. And I think that maybe just a key takeaway is flexibility, evaluating every opportunity on its own, not having any hard rules, and trying to figure out a way to make it work. Then you'll be that person that Deja wants to come back and work with again because you help find a solution or you helped work through the problem.
Fantastic. And then final question. There is a question in here about the split sheet. I think Carolyn and I had discussed sending around some various materials at the end of this week that would be helpful for all the attendees. So I will find a split sheet and we'll make sure that gets distributed. And then as far as the last question we have here, we've got 3 minutes left. Should an artist hire someone to help them get sync placements? And if so, where do they look for this person?
I mean, there are sync agents out there. But I think that, like there's this sync community is like a website where you're able to go on, and I know different supervisors will send briefs there or for advertising gaming. I don't think that it's wrong to have, a sync agent because it only gives more opportunity for placements. But I think it's equally as important to do the work on your end because you're aware of your catalog of your music and the type of music that you can make. Let's say that you're able to make something original for that project. Also being able to get in front, like, to Jeremy's point, like even with us, like doing panels often, like there's a brand that we're building on our end, just as you are doing on your end, right? So putting your face out there, putting yourself out there and making yourself known, I think is important, but there's nothing wrong with support.
Hugh, you have your hand up. I see you in the corner.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I appreciate, sharing your knowledge and I appreciate your time today. I'm wondering, I heard on the call that, not every song is made for sync, but, sometimes that certain songs do work, depending on what the opportunity is for. I'm curious if when artists and producers are sending folders out to supervisors, if those songs need to have stings and like clear transitions and things like that, or if songs can, or if the opportunity can work with a song as it is.
Yeah, it can work so Devin made a really good point earlier about still staying true to like your authenticity. Sometimes like libraries, will want just stock music, like you'll watch reality TV and you'll kind of just hear like the same things playing over and over. And sometimes it's just good to make those things because that's guaranteed money. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's also equally as important to make things that speak to who you are, that speak to what the program is, that is changing, right? Like Jeremy made a very good point earlier. Like my job is like, how can I evoke the most amount of emotion from the audience? So also having those things within your catalog. But to answer your question, being able to actually also have music that we're able to edit or, that is readily available when it comes to having sometimes it's nice to be able to have those things because then the music editor doesn't have to take as much time to like do the work, but also it's equally as important to make sure that those stems are also available to be able to make any changes, that need to be done. Like at the end of the day, someone's going to be on the other end still making the necessary edits to picture. But having it organized by genre, style, mood, BPM to make that process easier in the event that, they want to use more than one song or something like that, depending on how your folders are organized, is important. Like organizing it by emotion is key. If there was a lot of answers that kind of were just different things that I wanted to make sure were
But
said.
it was all very applicable though. So that was good.
My
That was
friend
well.
told me that there's no such thing as writing for sync because you actually don't know what you really it's different. It's different than writing, your heart and releasing it as commercial for somebody to listen to and to connect with. It has this, it's falls into a slightly different category. So it's, you're
It's
trying to
just
in a lot of ways to connect that emotion to something else. But
especially on again, I default to advertising. I think that's where I've done a lot of my work. But that's one where like art and commerce are really that is the direct intersection of those two things. And I never want to tell an artist how to make their art at all. I can give you an idea of what works in this media lane, and some of those things are going to be builds and drops and those production dynamics that you're sort of alluding to. To the extent that you can build some of that sensibility into your art, I would encourage it. But I would never suggest that you should over index and just do that for the sake of sync opportunity. But I think you can if you watch commercials, if you see what's working, you'll probably hear a handful of songs cycle through the NBA playoffs on branded uses. Make note of what those songs are, figure out how they're working. You'll probably see some patterns emerging there. And then to the extent you can internalize some of that while you're making your own art, it will probably help you. But I wouldn't want to be too prescriptive with any of that sort of suggestion there. You can make purely sync songs and like check all of the boxes of all the evergreen themes and all of all the production dynamics that typically work. But that's not going to have that authenticity as Devin mentioned, and I think that, as an artist, you should operate from intentionality and authenticity, in my opinion, and then, let the rest of us figure out how to frame it and reshape it and get it in the right hands from there.
yeah, amazing.
I put an
Okay.
example sorry.
No, go
I
ahead, go
know
ahead.
we're kind of going a little long, but I put an example if you guys want to check it out in the chat of an artist that this was something that we worked on, and this was going to be an example that I brought up because she's kind of like this, not super baby artist or anything like that, but she's no global superstar by any means, but she makes really fun, irreverent electronic pop dance music, and it's authentic to her. Like she comes out with I'm gonna be honest, like 90% of the stuff we have from her is not as sync friendly because it's very like explicit and fun, but it's not, exactly commercial friendly. But she had one song that was really fun, and we got this, at the time they just named it a telecom, very major telecom company. They didn't mention who the client was, and they were like, oh, we need a song about breaking things, fixing things, da 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 da. And we're like, oh, we have this one song from this one artist. Let's go ahead and pitch it. And this came through super organically. The supervisor loved it. The client loved it. They ended up licensing it. And that's just an example of a song that hit all the marks without having to sell itself out for the sake of being, too commercial or anything like that. You can still have fun. You can still be authentic. You can still, like I said, hit all the marks, but you don't necessarily have to try too hard to kind of get your music to fit. And this one was a really extreme example because this was like a, like I said, very irreverent dance pop, dynamic kind of music. But when it comes to, yeah, like, maybe you're a hip hop artist, maybe it's just the chorus that really hits, and the verses you can kind of, you know, you can do whatever, you can do your thing, and then on the chorus you just have a really cool dynamic, ear hooky chorus that has pretty universal lyrics. Maybe that's the only part that gets synced and edited too, as DJ was saying earlier. As long as they're able to manipulate around it and kind of make it fit, you can enjoy the authenticity and the process of creating your own work while still kind of like fulfilling the needs that, sync typically calls for.
Amazing. Well, we are several minutes over, so I know
There
we
is
can
one last
probably keep.
question we should probably address though. And no,
Okay, we will. We'll keep
AI is
going.
not going to ruin sync. I think it will eat in. I think it will eat into library music first and foremost. That's probably the first line of defense as far as that goes. But at the end of the day, I think creatives are looking for something that can elevate their own storytelling, and that elevation requires a human touch at some point, in my opinion. And I think as long as we can stay ahead of the machines in that regard, we'll be all right.
That's a great way to wrap it. Thank you so much to Deja and Jeremy and Devin for joining. There's some questions that we didn't even get to. Lisa Robinson, who's going to be in our panel tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit about the longevity of like this revenue and stuff. And so I really hope he will come back tomorrow as we sort of finish up this week. And I'm going to turn over to Carolyn. Is there anything else you want to say?
Hey guys, thank you so much. Really quick, again, I'd love to see you all in the B.A.K Playground. We are a vibrant community of vetted music professionals. You can connect with Jeremy there, Devin, Deja. Hopefully we'll be in there. A lot of the people on the Zoom or in the playground. It is direct access to each other. And just to be able to have a safe community that is focused on moving everyone's career forward, not just artists, but professionals too. It's just an awesome space to be. So I dropped a 3-month free membership link in the chat. Please use it, connect with me on there. Love to get to know all of you individually as well. And hopefully I'll see you back tomorrow for day 3. We're talking about budgeting your money, right? Organizing. Again, another word I'm not familiar with, but I will learn about it tomorrow. And yeah, I'll see you then. Same link, same time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
y'all.
Thanks, everyone.